Senate Estimates has been told that the Robodebt program costs almost as much as it recovers, asks for money that isn't owed, and puts considerable stress on vulnerable people. Given the widespread criticism of this poorly targeted and designed debt recovery initiative, what will it take for the government to stop this disastrous program and focus their efforts on other, fairer methods of increasing government revenue?
OK, we'll keep this one a little briefer, but Jason, starting with you, it's in the government's...
Sure, absolutely. So I'm just going to be brief. There are other things in that Senate hearing as well. That $1.9 billion worth of debts have been recovered, that there are $4.58 billion worth of debt still outstanding, that if you want to have a $172 billion welfare system that is properly targeted and designed to get people out of back to work and living their lives as best they can, you need to have integrity in that system. You can't do that unless you are collecting on debts. And by the way, we have a legal obligation to do that.
If you're making so much money from it, why not use human beings rather than robots?
Well, let's be very clear. The first thing that there are nearly 32,000 people in the Department of Human Services and Centrelink. That's number one. Number two, the way that the income assurance system works is that people are initially sent a letter saying we have data matched between different things that are going on, and we want to understand what is happening in your lives so that we can understand whether we have been paying you more or less money than we should have been doing. It goes both ways, by the way.
OK.
And that's what happens.
Cassandra, and I'll come back to our question who's got a hand up in a moment, but Cassandra, go ahead.
Yeah, so this Robodebt system has been in operation now for 3 years, yeah? The government has issued 500,000 alleged deaths. And on their own numbers, 1 in 5 of those has been wrong. And that's only been established, though, because people have had the guts, the tenacity to actually finally challenge the debts. We have no idea the number of people on very low incomes, often in very vulnerable circumstances, who have actually paid the money back because either they didn't realise how to challenge it, they were too fearful, all of those things. And we should remember that this is the government debt collection system, right? So first of all, we've stripped a lot of the human side out of it. So many of these debts alleged are wrong. And then, as it steamrolls on, government has the extraordinary powers to grab and come after you in a way that no private corporation is allowed to do. This is absolutely an abuse of government power. I'm really stunned, Jason, that the government is not taking this far more seriously. We're having reports in the media very regularly now of people being tipped over the edge, cases of people taking their life after receiving this kind of notice. You have to understand what it's like to be on the other side of this as a government, a big government comes after you when you don't know how to navigate that system. And so I really urge you to listen to how inhumane this is. And so many people have been so deeply distressed about it. The journalists have been doing your job. People directly affected have been doing your job, speaking up. I'm just questioning, what will it take for you to really be prepared to scrap this and acknowledge that you've got to get this right?
I'm going to quickly go back to our question because you had a hand up. Is Connell?
2 comments. Not everyone is capable of working. I am. In the past, I wasn't. And not everyone can. And another thing, I read in the media recently that a Robodebt notice was sent to a man who had died 6 months previously. Where are the safeguards? What are you doing for the vulnerable people who are targeted by this? Do you actually care?
I'll go to Katy first because we haven't heard from you on this. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, Labor has said that we should stop this program. We've had too many cases coming to us of people who've been very distressed. I don't know how many debt notices you've seen, Jason, but they're not written in a way that says, hi, we've got a few questions about how you're going. They're actually sent like a bill and they have, you owe this, and then it's, up to you to appeal it or argue it. And certainly from experience I've had in Canberra, just walking around, people coming up to me, very distressed. And then there's obviously been the high-profile media cases of people who are dying or who have died and having claims against them. There's people who are having debts raised from 25 years ago. We've got the situation where in Townsville they've paused the program, presumably in recognition that it's quite distressing for victims of the flood up there. So the government's acknowledged that in Townsville. So I think this really does go to, again, the government working it out, providing the resources that are needed. We have no problem with collecting the money that's due. If there have been overpayments, that's part of the system. But, the way it's been run at the moment, the high error rate, the fact that it relies on individuals to argue their case, and in some cases, I've got colleagues in the parliament where 100% of the people that have come to their constituent office have had all of their debts waived, and there's no transparency about that. If you don't appeal and you pay, maybe you shouldn't have. There's just no transparency. So we think the program should be stopped, resources should be provided, and the government needs to get a grip on it.
Zali, a case for crossbench intervention here? I mean, you have intervened on other issues.
We have, and I think as independents on the crossbench, we tend to stand up for wanting probably integrity of process and really transparency and accountability. So it is concerning. Look, I did feel that the minister in question time, and that came up a lot in our last week in Parliament, I did feel that he dealt with it and certainly apologised for the instances that had gone wrong. I think it is a classic case of oversight by robots is probably not the best way to go. At the end of the day, get back to jobs and having real people looking at the facts and the cases. I think, especially when you're talking with highly vulnerable people where an oversight can have really dire consequences. But there is that the mandatory obligation to report and to update your information. So you have to be reasonable as well that this is a system that does require accountability. There has to be a process of debt recovery, but it has to be, I think, a little bit more human and reasonable.